Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Sir, before we proceed to today's evidence, there is a matter which you have asked me to address at the outset of today's hearing. We were due to hear today from two witnesses, Diane Matthews and Lisa Allen. As you are aware, we will now be hearing from Ms. Matthews only, following a decision you made late yesterday afternoon relating to Ms. Allen's evidence. Earlier this week, Ms. Allen, who is employed by Royal Mail, alerted the inquiry team to the existence of 90 documents relating to the investigation and prosecution of Suzanne Palmer, held by Royal Mail. She was able to find these documents as she has access as an employee to Royal Mail's systems. The inquiry sought and has now been provided with these documents. It appears that a significant proportion of the documents have not been provided to the inquiry previously. It is also evident that the documents are highly relevant, both to Ms. Palmer's case and to Ms. Allen's involvement in it. In these circumstances, and mindful that these documents need to be disclosed to core participants so that they can consider them ahead of Ms. Allen giving evidence, you concluded that it is not practicable to proceed with Ms. Allen's evidence today. It is right to note that this appears to be a different species of disclosure problem than the inquiry has encountered previously. The inquiry team is investigating with the Post Office how this problem has come about. At your request, the inquiry team communicated your decision about Ms. Allen's evidence to core participants by email yesterday afternoon, immediately after it was made. This has meant that unnecessary travel for Mrs. Palmer, who was intending to attend today to hear Lisa Allen's evidence, has been avoided. Finally, sir, you expressed a wish that Ms. Allen attend to give evidence on a replacement date before the break to minimise the impact on the timetable. I am able to confirm that Ms. Allen has confirmed she is able to attend to give evidence on the 20th of December in place of today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Price. And in view of the very full explanation which you've provided, I don't propose to add anything, especially given that the inquiry team and the Post Office are engaged in seeking to ascertain what went wrong on this occasion. However, if Ms. Gallifant does wish to say anything at this stage, I will afford her the opportunity to do so now.
So simply to say, we're grateful to the inquiry for acting upon this so promptly, and in particular informing other core participants that Ms. Allen wouldn't be able to give evidence today in the circumstances, and meaning that Ms. Palmer didn't need to come today. But we do apologise to Ms. Palmer because obviously the expectation of coming and hearing from Ms. Allen itself is a difficulty and problematic for any individual involved in these proceedings. I can confirm that we in Post Office are continuing to look into how this particular issue arose, but we agree with the analysis of counsel to the inquiry that it appears to be of a different sort to those previously encountered, and we hope a one-off that can be easily remediable. I have nothing further to assist in terms of what may have happened, but we will obviously write to the inquiry as soon as we're in a position to assist in that respect. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Beer.
Thank you, sir. Can I call Diane Matthews, please?
Yeah.
Good morning, Ms. Matthews. Can you hear me? My name is Jane, and I'll take you through the affirmation.
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. If you'd like to repeat after me, I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms Matthews. My name is Jason Beer and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you give us your full name, please?
Yes, it's Diane Sarah Matthews.
Thank you very much for giving evidence remotely today and for previously providing a witness statement to the inquiry. You should have a copy of that witness statement in front of you. Is that right?
I do, yes.
It's dated the 1st of November 2023 and excluding the exhibit sheets is 36 pages in length. Can you go to the 36th page, please?
Yes,
Is that your signature?
it is, yes.
And are the contents of the statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes,
Thank you. A copy of that witness statement is going to be uploaded to the inquiry's website. I'm going to ask you some questions about some parts of it. Do you understand?
I do, yes.
Thank you. Can we start with your professional background, please? I think you joined the post office in March 1986 as a counter clerk. Is that right?
Yes,
You left Royal Mail Group in 2018. Is that right?
it is, yes.
So 32 years service?
Yes,
Looking into the divisions within that 32 years, I think you were a counter clerk for 13 years between 1986 and 1999. Is that right?
yes, various things within the branch office network, yeah.
Between 1999 and 2003, you were seconded to work on the rollout of the Horizon system. Is that right?
Yes,
Between 2003 and 2004, you worked as an assistant branch manager and then an audit manager. Is that right?
yes.
And that included conducting some audits yourself.
Yes, the audits I conducted were normally at Crown offices, the larger ones.
Then between 2004 and 2008, you worked in the Post Office Investigation Department, being promoted in 2007 to a security manager, managing a team of investigators. Is that right?
Yes,
In 2008, you moved to Royal Mail Group as an investigator, where you stayed for 10 years until 2018, when you retired.
yes,
I'm principally interested, as you'll know, in the 4 or so year period between 2004 and 2008, when you worked in the post office as an investigator and then as a manager of other investigations. But before we look at that period, that 4-year period, can we look back at an earlier period? You tell us in paragraph 2 of your statement, there's no need to turn it up at the moment, when referring to your secondment to the Horizon rollout team between 1999 and 2003, that you had a role, quote, managing a team of 22 Horizon field support officers in ensuring they were supported in managerial terms, for example, timetable, accommodation, and performance.
that's correct, yes.
Was your role, as that sentence might suggest, purely an administrative one, concerned with the management and logistics of the team, or did you have any substantive involvement in the rollout process itself?
When I joined in 1999, I was part of a small group of people that did what was called live trial, and it was migrating. It was only a small amount of post offices, and I remember I went to Northern Ireland in Belfast to do that, and they were put onto the Horizon system, and it was like a test. And it was after that it got paused, and I stayed working within that function, then to take over the administrative duties in terms of pulling a team together and what that schedule would look like. From that period, I didn't attend offices doing the migration. My role was purely to look after the people that were out there in the field doing that role.
Dealing with the first part first then, when you were involved with offices themselves, this was live trials rather than rollout, is that right?
That's correct.
And did you receive the feedback that the branches that you were responsible for gave as to what was going on in the course of the live trial?
I wouldn't say I received the feedback. I obviously knew when I was there undertaking the role that there was issues. What came further along as part of them issues, I wasn't party to that detail really. I knew from my role that the office migrated. There was network issues. That's what I was told was the problem with it, was network issues. And the office carried on working. It did have some problems with the functionality in terms of it kept crashing. There was hardware problems. And then after, I think I was there 3 days, and it was more a case of helping the counter clerks understand the workings, the balancing, the day-to-day duties that needed to be done. And then after that, it went to a much higher level than me to determine what them issues were and what was going to happen next.
So in the course of the live trial, you were told about problems that included network issues. I think you've told us about problems with connectivity,
Yes.
with hardware, and did you say balancing as well?
No, not with the balancing. I was there to assist them with the balancing, but when you say I was told about that, I experienced that. I saw that firsthand because I was there when they were having issues with it. But obviously there was engineers on site for this particular part of the process because it was right at the very beginning. So anything that needed to be addressed was addressed there and then. And
how long did this work last?
My role in it?
Yes.
Yeah. I can remember I did 2 offices. I know one was in Belfast. I think the other one was probably in the UK. And it was only a very short period of time. I think I stayed 4 days at each office. And that probably took me from when I joined probably to, it was over maybe a 3-month period.
I see. And then you became responsible for 22 HFSOs, the field support officers.
That's correct, yes.
And what did the field support officers do?
They were there to oversee the day of migration. So they would liaise with the auditors that would go in, perform an audit, and they would then take over in terms of entering the cash and stock figures onto the Horizon system. They would then stay for a period of, I think it was normally 3 days, and they would stay at the office and assist the sub-postmaster and their staff with the transition from manual to computer-based ways of serving and balancing. They would then, if a Wednesday wasn't part of them 3 days, they would then return and assist with one of the balancing days or the first balancing day.
We have heard evidence about a series of problems, some of them significant, that were identified and evident during the testing and rollout phases. Were you aware at the time of such problems identified during the 4 or so year period that you undertook this role?
I was aware there was issues, yes.
And in terms of significance or scale of issues, can you help us with what your memory is of that?
Yeah, my recollections were that it was sufficient enough to delay the actual rollout at first. I think when rollout did start, there was also delays with certain offices. To be honest, I was led to believe they were more network issues, and there was some problems with maybe a keyboard not working. But I do know not in my area, but I do know nationally that there was probably more substantial problems with getting offices onto the system.
Did you gain any knowledge about difficulties in balancing using the new system?
I knew there were issues balancing, yes, but I think that was put down more to user issues. It wasn't, I don't think at first it was particularly user friendly for someone that had never used any sort of computer-based equipment before. And I think it was a massive transition for some people. And I knew that therefore there was problems balancing. I also knew that there was problems balancing because of significant figures that were being generated. And
significant figures being generated by what?
The system was just trying to remember an example. There was figures put in suspense accounts, and the next week it would drop off, and it was like nobody had an answer as to why. And these were like put down as maybe people not using it right, maybe the system hadn't been migrated correctly. But I didn't really get into them issues because that's not what my role was at that particular time.
And so, trying to encapsulate what you've just said, in the course of this testing and then the rollout phase, the system was generating large discrepancies that were placed in a suspense account and then would disappear. And you say that they put it down to either user error or the system. Is that right?
Figures were on a printout on balance day, and nobody could identify where it had come from. So therefore, that figure then got put into a suspense account, and it got dropped. Why that happened, whether it was a transaction that hadn't been put in correctly, I wasn't there, and I just know that one or two of my team reported issues up to Fujitsu because of that. Therefore, my role in that was to provide that office with extra support. So my role was to then reschedule the HFSOs to obviously make sure that personnel could be there. So I wasn't close to the detail of them problems. I just knew that I had to change some of what my scheduling was because the office needed more support because of it.
Did you ever experience problems in using Horizon when you were acting as an assistant branch manager?
No.
Were you aware of others around you experiencing problems with Horizon when you were acting as an assistant branch manager?
No.
By the time that you finished your job as assistant branch manager, if I'd ask you what's your view as to the reliability and robustness of Horizon, what would you have said?
I'd have said it was reliable and robust because I never personally experienced any problems or knew of anybody in the Crown Office network that I worked with that did. And
so what impact had these things that you'd been told by your HFSOs about sub-postmasters having problems with the system had on your view on the reliability and robustness of Horizon by, say, 2003-04?
It was explained that with a project of this size and magnitude, we were told it was the biggest single computer install in the UK, that there was teething problems, that there were going to be issues, and that obviously they would monitor and work through them. That's how it was portrayed right at the very beginning. And I just thought that, you know, it just stands to reason there's going to be concerns, there's going to be issues, and that they will work through and resolved.
And who was passing you that message, the one that you've just relayed to us?
It was just part of the Horizon team. It probably came from quite high up. I can't remember who was over the Horizon install project, but they were the messages that were cascaded down.
And were they in turn cascaded down by your team to sub-postmasters?
I don't know.
And so the overall impression by the time we get to 2004 that you walked away with was that although there were problems with the system, this was to be expected in a system so large and complex, and these were just teething problems.
At the very beginning, yes. By the time the end of the rollout was approaching, the migrations were getting much smoother. It'd probably been like that for the majority of the final phase. I mean, some of the problems were that there was no phone lines put in at an office. It could be a simple explanation as to why there were delays. It wasn't always to do with the actual system. It could have been something to do with some of the pre-work that needed to be done in order for the install to happen. But yeah, I didn't experience many, if any, reports for about the last 12 months of install. By that, I'm not saying there wasn't any, but there certainly wasn't any concerns, let's say, that couldn't be put down to user error or issues with problems with the electrics, etc.
Can we turn then to the 4-year period from 2004 to 2008 when you worked in the investigations department? You were a security manager and an investigator, and you carried out a number of investigations yourself. Is that right?
Yes.
In that 4-year period, how many investigations do you think you undertook?
It probably wasn't. It was probably about 20, but my first 6 months were purely assisting other people because I was brought in on a temporary term to do pension docket fraud, and then after that I got taken on permanently. So that was probably towards the start of 2005. And then from my best recollection, it was around that time that I undertook the training. So I'd actually been working within the team before I started training, but it was purely as an administrative thing, looking at pension docket fraud.
So in the 4-year period, perhaps 5 investigations a year?
Yeah, the first probably 18 months, it probably wasn't anywhere near that. But obviously, as I got more experienced, I was probably given more.
When you were carrying out that investigation work, did you have an understanding that all departments and all divisions within the post office were subject to a legal duty to retain and record information that might be relevant to the post office's function of bringing private prosecutions?
Yes.
What were the processes within the post office to ensure that such information was retained and recorded?
When you say processes,
Yes.
what do you mean?
You said that you knew that the post office was under a legal duty to ensure that all parts of the organisation, all divisions and departments, retained and recorded information that was or might be relevant to the prosecution function.
Yes.
And I'm asking what processes were put in place to ensure that retaining and recording duty could be carried out?
Well, we obviously had to follow PACE and CPIA and guidelines, and they were.
Ms. Matthews, is more about the reveal function
Right,
by an investigator to go and find the material and ensure that it's revealed. I'm looking at the stage before then. An organisation that prosecutes people knows that it's under a duty to retain and record information that might be relevant to the prosecution. How was that carried into effect?
I'm sort of struggling with the question a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
I can tell you what I did.
So if I run a sweet shop and I don't prosecute anyone, I might keep my books for a year and then I might throw them away.
Right, okay.
I might not write down everything that I buy and sell because I think, well, I'm not going to be prosecuting anyone. I needn't do that. If, however, I know that I might prosecute people, I might think to myself, I need this information, not just to know how many sweets I've sold or bought, but because I'm going to be prosecuting people, and the information that I'm creating might be used as the basis to prosecute them. Therefore, I've got these whole other duties, these legal duties, because I'm not just a seller of sweets, I'm a prosecutor too. I've got to do some different things in the running of my business to make sure that what I do is in compliance with the law and is fair.
So everything that I did in terms of when I gathered evidence, first of all we had guidelines, we had casework guidelines, we had policies and procedures that we had to follow that were accessible via a database, and whatever I did in terms of an investigation was documented. So I either made a notebook entry or any evidence that I got was then retained and it was disseminated onto different forms depending on how that information was classified.
So I'm again looking at the stage.
I don't really think I'm answering your question here
No.
because I'm a bit lost in what it is. I understand what you're saying, but I don't know. I can't remember what procedures were in place for that.
So was there, for example, a series of data stores that that the post office had set up that could be accessed by you, where the information you obtained from them had been recorded in an evidentially secure fashion?
I don't remember storing any evidence.
Were there, for example, standing instructions to auditors that you remember about the way that they could conduct their audits? Because they weren't just conducting an audit. If the audit showed a shortfall or a discrepancy, then the auditor's evidence might be translated into criminal prosecution evidence, and the auditors might be called as witnesses, and what they said to a suspect, to a postmaster, might be used in evidence against the postmaster. So what I'm trying to establish is, as an investigator, what did you know about the way that the rest of the business organised itself to ensure that it was ready to conduct prosecutions?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
What processes, turning to you as an investigator then, existed to ensure that there was the sufficient collection and collation of information relating to the operation of Horizon?
From my recollection, it was an online database that you could access, and all relevant documents that you needed to refer to would be on there.
And So as an investigator, you could access some data that was created by Horizon, is that right?
No, I'm talking about operating processes.
Okay. So, i.e. policies and procedures about the conduct of an investigator?
Yes, I've never been able to access any historic Horizon data online.
Okay, so what were the processes for obtaining access to Horizon data as an investigator?
From my recollection, I would have to make a request to the casework team, and they would.
Who were the casework team? Were they part of the security department?
Yes, they were, yeah.
And
They're a function of the security and investigations based in Croydon.
And how many of them were there?
No idea.
And so if you wanted some data from or about Horizon, you would contact the casework team?
Yes.
And what would operate on your mind in deciding whether to make such a request to the casework team?
If an investigation if it was to do with some transactions that were in question, or to look at if during investigation interviews that the person being interviewed come up with some reasons why a loss had happened, and if they related to anything transactional or anything to do with maybe balancing, then you could always go and get the transactions, and that would probably dictate if I would ask or not.
Okay, so it was if there was a questionable transaction or if the suspect raised an issue, they would be the triggers for going off and getting this data?
Yeah, or it could be if further down the line you decided that you needed further information or you needed to clarify something, then you could request it. But from my recollection, there was limits.
Limits on what?
There was limits on the number of, I think these were called ARQ requests.
Yes.
For the business, there was limits on the number of ARQ requests that could be made in a month. After that quota was taken up, Post Office Limited had to pay for it, and it was, you had to have a really, really good reason why you needed it in order to invoke the cost element of it.
And so did the limitation and then the cost penalty have an impact on the number of occasions that you requested ARQ data?
It didn't have an impact on the number of occasions I requested it. It may have had an impact on the number of discs I received. The
number of?
Discs. ARQs came on like CD discs. So I can't recall any particular case or time when I didn't receive them, but I may have received them in the next month.
Were there any processes within the Post Office security team to ensure that there was proper recording and cross-dissemination of information about issues that had been raised as to the operation of Horizon in prior investigations and prosecutions?
I don't know. By the time I left, I hadn't really heard of issues being raised with Horizon, but shortly after I left, I knew it was starting. So I don't know what the processes were for that.
There wasn't a central repository, a database, a share file, some other document where all investigators within the security team could feed in problems or issues that had either been raised by a suspect or had been established?
To do with Horizon?
Yes.
Not while I was there, no. But like I say, I hardly heard of any issues regarding this before I left.
If a suspect said that there is some error or bug or defect with Horizon that's causing the loss, was there a central repository of information in the post office, putting aside the security team for the moment, to which you would turn to say, my suspect has suggested that there's a problem with Horizon. What does the post office know about an error, bug or defect in the system?
Not to my knowledge. I didn't know of that.
Which departments would you speak to gather any information about that?
I never needed to, apart from on one occasion.
And that's Mr. Huey Thomas's case, is that right?
Yes. And obviously what I did is I raised it to criminal law team, and also the casework team were aware of it, as well as obviously my team leader.
You tell us that, and it's paragraph 41 of your statement, no need to turn it up for the moment, that when you left in 2008, Mr. Thomas's case involving alleged faults with the Horizon system remained the only investigation that you led or had involvement in which such claims were made. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you discuss the claims made by Mr. Thomas with the rest of the investigation team?
I can't remember. I obviously knew that Steve Bradshaw, who was, he was with me at the time, he obviously knew. My team leader would have known. I guess I would have told the rest of the team. It would have been a discussion point, because I think it was the first time that claim had been made.
To your knowledge, was that the first time that the Post Office had heard of an allegation of a fault with Horizon that was leading to errors or discrepancies in the accounts?
I have no knowledge or idea of what the Post Office knew. I only knew that was the first time it had been raised and brought to my attention.
And who do you think you may have discussed it with, other than obviously Mr. Bradshaw, your co-investigator?
But there would have been a few people. I would specifically about Mr. Thomas's case. There was involvement from Emily Hughes, the area manager. There would have been involvement from Paul Dawkins, my line manager at the time. I would imagine, but I can't speak for him, that would have then been raised up to John Scott.
The head of security?
Yes.
And in relation to that sort of escalating series of individuals, did you ever have any word back? In fact, there have been allegations made about the operation of Horizon and the system causing shortfalls and discrepancies almost right from the beginning, from 2000.
I didn't know of any other case at that moment in time where the integrity of the Horizon system had been brought into question. I obviously knew from my previous working history that there'd been issues right at the beginning, but we were led to believe that they had been resolved.
And when you said you were led to believe, was that a sort of a corporate message? Is that a fair way of describing it?
Yes.
In paragraph 24 of your witness statement, you set out the process followed by security team investigators when conducting an investigation. And in paragraph 30 of your witness statement, you say, in the investigations I undertook, I followed the evidence trail. Yes? In paragraph 43 of your witness statement, you say that, quote, you do not know if ARQ data was requested from Fujitsu as a matter of course regarding shortfalls identified, which the sub-postmaster or clerk attributed to the Horizon system. I was not involved in this process. Does it follow that it was your understanding that ARQ data was not requested as a matter of course when an investigator or a prosecutor sought to rely on Horizon data in their investigation and their prosecution?
It's difficult. Well, I can't answer that question because the only one I knew about was Mr. Thomas, and I requested the ARQ data, and then I left shortly after. So the majority of the issues were probably after my time, but the only one that I was aware of, certainly within my team, was Mr. Thomas.
I think what you're saying, Ms. Matthews, is that it's only if the suspect raised a problem that the trigger would be to request Horizon ARQ
Yes.
data. Is that right? And so
Yes,
it
yes.
wasn't requested as a matter of course in every investigation or prosecution in order to prove the loss.
That's correct.
How was the loss proved then?
By an audit going in and checking the cash and stock on hand.
So that half of that is walking into the branch and seeing how many stamps, gyros and pound notes are there, yes?
Yes.
But the other half of it is relying on what Horizon says should be there.
Yes.
What evidence was obtained, if any, to establish that what Horizon said should be there was accurate? Or did you just take the balance sheet that Horizon printed out?
It was just taken, yes.
So you didn't peek behind that as a matter of course to see the process by which that account had been created by the system?
You wouldn't doubt the integrity of the system because we were led to believe that wasn't in question.
Putting aside whether you were told that the system had integrity or was robust or not, I think it follows that you didn't think that there was a need to prove the accuracy of the account that Horizon produced. It was sufficient if Horizon produced an account.
I think it was accepted that if the cash and stock figures that were on hand were represented on the Horizon system, then you'd accept the figures that were printed off, yes.
Moving on to your understanding of disclosure obligations, you tell us in your witness statement that, as you've done today, that the Post Office Security Department was governed by the provisions of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act and the CPIA, and you tell us that you received training on, amongst other things, disclosing evidence. I just want to explore, without looking at an individual case yet, your understanding of the disclosure obligations. Can you confirm, please, from the perspective of a security manager, that you received training on the fundamental importance of disclosure to the criminal process?
Yes.
Did you receive training on the nature of the statutory disclosure duties owed by an investigator and by a prosecutor?
Yes.
What did you understand as to whether those duties could be delegated to a third party?
I've probably got slightly confused when I've written my witness statement. My understanding was it's up to the investigator to obtain, collate and disclose all documentation. However, I've probably misinterpreted the question and seen the disclosure as disclosure to the defence, which wasn't part of my duty.
Were you trained on something called the 3 Rs? Does that ring a bell?
Is that, yeah. You put me on the spot now, but I do recall it. Is it? It's
Retain, record and reveal.
Yes. Yes.
That was part of the training.
Yes.
Was there training on how those maybe abstract or theoretical principles were translated into effect within the post office, i.e. how the business was going to retain, how the business was going to record, and how the business was going to reveal documents?
I don't remember that. I don't remember receiving specific training. That's not to say I didn't, I just can't remember.
Did you receive training about a CPIA code requirement about reasonable lines of inquiry?
I can't remember specifically.
What did you understand the duty of an investigator to be in terms of the pursuit of lines of inquiry?
That you had to follow all lines of inquiry to understand what's gone on in a particular situation.
Whether they pointed away or towards the suspect's
Absolutely, yes.
guilt, yes?
Yes.
Was that translated into practice, again, that high-level statement of a duty in operation in the post office, i.e. What must we do when a suspect says that it's Horizon that's causing discrepancies in their branch?
Well, again, I can only recall the one time I've had to deal with that, and obviously I took it extremely seriously and made relevant decisions to try and find out whether the Horizon system was to blame or causing issues or have bugs and defects. It has to be checked.
You tell us in your witness statement, it's paragraphs 57 and 58, no need to turn them up, that you completed disclosure schedules to ensure that relevant unused material was scheduled and brought to the attention of reviewing lawyers and the Prosecution Support Office, yes?
Yeah.
When you say that you submitted the relevant documents for the purposes of disclosure, do you mean that when you were the investigating officer in a case, you would collate the unused material that you had gathered and complete the relevant schedules of material yourself?
Yes.
And would they include a schedule of non-sensitive material, a schedule of sensitive material, and a disclosure officer's report?
Yes.
And what processes would you undertake to ensure that a reviewing lawyer was aware of the existence of material that may assist the defence or may undermine the prosecution case?
I would ensure that they were aware of it, but I don't actually recall ever having anything like that.
Never in your 4 years was there any material that might undermine a prosecution or help a defendant?
I don't recall putting anything on a sensitive schedule. I always remember that everything was either used or unused, and everything was on them two documents. I don't ever remember having anything that was classified as sensitive.
putting aside the sensitive for the moment, whose decision was it whether material should be disclosed to the defence?
Criminal law team.
You tell us in paragraph 58 of your statement that you were not the disclosure officer in any cases.
Yeah, I think I've misinterpreted the question on that. I understand my duty as a disclosure officer was to provide all the information to the criminal law team. What I've read into that question was what then happened in order to disclose it to the defence.
I see. I mean, if we just look at what you say in your witness statement, page 18 of your witness statement, it will come up on the screen for you. At the foot of the page. We're dealing here with Janet Skinner's case, and at 58 you say, I was not the disclosure officer in this case or any cases. The decision on what was disclosed was a legal matter and dealt with by the prosecution team. I submitted all documents to them on the relevant paperwork, and I played no further part in the dissemination of the evidence. And if we go forwards to page 34, at paragraph 99, when we're dealing with Hughie Thomas's case, you say in 99, I was not the disclosure officer in this case. This was undertaken by the prosecution support office. I think you just told me that you had misunderstood the questions that led to those two paragraphs, 58 and 99. What did you misunderstood?
I've taken it as, when talking about disclosure to the defence, not disclosure to, from the outset of the investigation. I thought it was discussing the disclosure to the defence lawyers.
Had you received training on what the role and duties of a disclosure officer were?
I would have done at the time, but you're asking me this question now, so, you know, about I've misinterpreted the question.
I'm going to show you in probably an hour's time a couple of disclosure schedules where you're shown as the disclosure officer and you've signed the disclosure schedule saying you complied with your duties as disclosure officer. What did you understand your duties as disclosure officer were?
That I had to disclose all information that has been obtained as part of the investigation.
And you understood that as meaning disclosure to the criminal law team, and then you're drawing a distinction between the actual provision of documents to the defendant, which was undertaken by the Prosecution Support Office. Is that right?
I thought that was what the question was asking. Who disclosed the information to the defence? That's how I've misinterpreted the question. I understand my role as a disclosure officer was to obtain and disclose every piece of information that was gathered as part of the investigation.
Okay, that can come down, thank you. Who or what was the Prosecution Support Office?
They were, from recollection, an administrative function within the criminal law team.
Were they lawyers?
I don't know. I know some were legal execs, but I don't know what their legal training was.
And were they based in one place or more than one place?
I think they were based in London within the criminal law team, but I couldn't say 100%.
And it was your understanding that they were the ones responsible for physically giving disclosure, is that right?
Yes. Them and obviously in line with the assigned lawyer.
Sorry, can you say that again? Your voice dropped.
Sorry, yeah, the prosecution support office as well as the assigned lawyer to the case.
Can we turn to paragraph 34 and 35 of your witness statement, please, which will come up on the screen. It's page 11. Paragraph 34, you say, I've been asked what I understood by the bullet points on page 2 of the casework management document. You've reviewed it. The first 3 bullet points are regarding the documents required to be associated in any case file. All case files go in the first instance to the prosecution support office. With regards to bullet point 4, concerning failures in operational procedures and security, my recollections on this are anything you observed or encountered which played a part in a fraud being committed or loss in an office. And then you give some examples and say at the end of the paragraph, these are examples where the business would not want these details to become common knowledge. Can we just look at that document, please? Poll 0010 477. We can see if we just look at the foot of the page, it's dated October 2002, and then look at the top of the page. Casework management is an investigation policy whose purpose is to ensure that adequate controls are in place to maintain standards throughout investigation processes. And then if we go to the points that you were referring to in your witness statement, which is on page 2, and if we look at the 5th bullet point, the one beginning the issue of, thank you, if that can just be highlighted, the issue of dealing with information concerning procedural failures is a difficult one. Some major procedural weaknesses, if they become public knowledge, may have an adverse effect on our business. They may assist others to commit offences against our business, undermine a prosecution case, bring our business into disrepute, or harm relations with major customers. Unless the offender states he's aware that accounting weaknesses exist and he took advantage of them, it's important not to volunteer that option to the offender during interview. The usual duties of disclosure under the CPIA still apply. Was it your understanding that if your investigation identified a procedure failing or some other irregularity that may undermine a case against the suspect or assist them in some way, that had to be brought to the attention of legal services?
Yes.
If we just look at the bullet point above, please, bullet point 4. If during the course of the inquiry failures in security or operational procedures are identified, which may or may not be directly connected with the offences under investigation, full detail must be included within the report to legal services. If necessary, any urgent remedial action can be notified to the appropriate operational manager verbally, etc. And so, irrespective of what's in that 5th bullet point, you knew that if a procedural failure or some other irregularity that undermined a case against the suspect existed, that had to be brought to the attention of legal services. Is that right?
Yes.
And would that be in the confidential investigation report that was submitted to legal services?
Yes.
Can you recall instances where, in the words of the policy, the business would not want the details to become public knowledge?
I can remember a couple of them, yes.
Were they to do with physical security issues?
One was to do with an Alliance and Leicester issue in particular.
Was that to do with the way that the system operated?
It was to do with the system allowing a customer to make multiple deposits of up to £20,000 at a time into the system without any checks. So in other words, one of the cases I had was £500,000 had been deposited during somebody's lunch hour, and the system allowed them to do it, and it was obviously a weakness where there was no checks.
Did you understand, that can come down, the policy, thank you, what we've just read in the policy about not revealing procedural weaknesses to be and only to be about cases where future advantage might be taken of the weakness?
No, I didn't see it like that.
How did you see it?
I saw it as anything that might not only allow people to take advantage, but also could bring the company into question. So again, we use Horizon. If I was aware that it was Horizon, that would be raised.
Raised with who?
Through the criminal law team, but if that was the case, they would probably also be raised to a much higher level.
This, the policy is saying don't reveal that to the suspect in the interview.
At that particular time, though, if it wasn't an issue about Horizon, I wouldn't reveal anything, because I wouldn't have anything to reveal at that time, because it would mean I would have to go and check the situation that had been put in front of me.
Can I turn to a different topic, the last of the general issues before we look at the case studies, and your understanding of the relationship between the instruction of an expert and the duties of disclosure? Did you know that the instruction of an expert gave rise to distinct and particular disclosure obligations on the part of the prosecution?
No.
Were you aware of a requirement, I'm not going to set out where it arises, that communications with an expert were subject to a particular duty to retain?
I don't recall that.
Does that mean that you wouldn't have included communications with an expert on your schedules of unused material?
I would include everything that I had as part of the case on the schedules, in terms of it would go somewhere. But when you say about an expert, in order to get an expert witness statement, I wouldn't personally do that.
Who would personally do that?
As from my best recollection, I would go to the casework manager.
And who was the casework manager? Is it Mr. Ward?
I think Graham Ward was one of them.
We're going to see over the next couple of hours your involvement in procuring evidence from Gareth Jenkins in the case of Hughie Thomas, looking at a wide variety of communications, either involving you or in which you were a copyee, about the content of the evidence that he was going to give, about revisions to his witness statement, about adding bits in and taking bits out. Would you have understood that those communications were disclosable to the defence?
Yes.
And that they should be listed in the schedule of unused material?
Yes.
when we look at the schedule in due course, in Mr. Thomas's case, we can see that they were not listed. Looking at the matter generally, do you know why that was?
My only recollection of how that would have happened was because when I would do my first disclosure of all the evidence I had, the statements would then form part of the evidence that was gathered after, that went to the prosecution support office and would be added then. I didn't see the bundle again after I'd done my initial disclosure of all the information I got from the initial investigation. I wouldn't do a supplementary one. It would be added as by the prosecution team, the criminal law team, as part of new evidence.
Whose duty was it to conduct a rolling disclosure exercise by the completion of successive schedules of unused material as the investigation proceeded?
I'm presuming it was the prosecution support office and criminal law team.
You're saying that you did one schedule and one schedule only when you submitted the papers, and that was it?
My best recollection of what I did at the time is that I did the initial scope of work, of which I then did disclosure on every document I had. These were supplementary things that I didn't really have much involvement in from my recollection.
We're going to see.
That statement came.
We're going to see in a moment that you did have some involvement in them, but putting that to one side, did you not understand your duty as the investigator and the disclosure officer to include the preparation and submission of supplemental schedules of unused material as the investigation and prosecution proceeded?
I was led to believe that would be done by another department.
And who led you to believe that it was to be done by the department?
Because that was my liaison with them in the criminal law team and prosecution support office.
Okay, we'll maybe see this in action when we look at specific cases. Just lastly, generally, did you understand that you were under a duty to disclose to the defence drafts of witness statements if they materially differed from the final signed version?
Yes.
Can we look at Hughie Thomas's case then, please? And can we start, please, with poll 304 7748? These are the terms of reference for the criminal investigation into Mr. Thomas. And can you see, if we just scroll down, please, investigator, thank you, you're shown as the investigator, yes?
Yes.
And if we pan back out to look at the whole of the page, is this a document that was completed at the beginning of the investigation?
I believe so, but I don't actually recall this document.
Well, I was going to ask you what the purpose of the terms of reference document for a criminal investigation was.
I don't recall. I can't remember that document.
Was it a document completed by the investigator?
I'm presuming so, yes, but I don't ever remember seeing, or I don't have any recollection of that document.
If we just look, we can see the office name at the top, which is Mr. Thomas's office. It says Customer 1, Emily Hughes, Service and Contracts Manager. What function did Mr. Hughes perform?
He was the area manager for North Wales.
And so was he's described as customer one, but what does that mean?
I have no idea what customer one means because I don't recollect this form at all. But I knew who Emily News was. He looked after the sub postmasters and their contracts.
If
He
we
wasn't anything to do with the security team.
If we scroll down, please, to the big box at the bottom, thank you. Details of incident. Audit took place on the 13th of October 2005, result of which was a loss of £48,000. The majority of the loss was in cash. Sub-Postmaster Mr. Thomas was arrested on suspicion of theft of post office funds. Cash accounts do not show any losses gains, so there is also false accounting. Mr. Thomas has blamed the loss on the Horizon system, saying online banking transactions are producing nil totals when he has given cash out over the counter to customers. Mr. Thomas insisted he only has access to the office, while the only other user on the system is his wife. He has a buyer for the post office and expects to reimburse post office with the proceeds of the sale. And then the line which says, 3 paragraphs from the top there, Mr. Thomas has blamed the loss on the Horizon system, and then he gives an explanation. It's online banking that are producing nil totals when he's given cash out to customers. If we go over the page, please. Box 6, as a result of an initial scoping exercise, in this section, the investigator has identified the initial activities to be undertaken in dealing with this incident. Objective, to collate information regarding the background for £48,000 loss at branch, to interview the sub-postmaster, Mr. Thomas, and seek reasons for the audit loss at the branch, gather facts surrounding problems at the branch. Outcome anticipated, obtain relevant information, look to recover the audit loss of £48,000 by the 25th of October 2005. Can you help us why this does not include, given Mr. Thomas had squarely blamed the loss on Horizon, any mention as an investigative action, an investigation into the Horizon system?
I don't recall this form, so I can't add anything to it.
I mean, that's a pretty obvious line of inquiry, isn't it, given what he had said?
Yes.
A suspect raising squarely the problem with Horizon and identifying what the issue was.
Yes.
So that ought to have resulted in an investigative activity. Is that right?
Yes.
Can we move forwards then, please, to FUJ 0015 5181? And if we start at the back, we're going to end up with this ARQ request. If we start at the back of page 23 of this document, please. And if we just scroll to the page above, please. The bottom of the page above. Thank you. We see an email there from you to Mr. Ward of the 14th of October 2005. Can you see that? Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And you say, Graham, just to clarify, the sub-postmaster has not made any calls to HSH or MBSC. Do you now recall what those are?
Yes.
Can you tell us what your recollection of HSH and MBSC is now?
HSH, I think, is the Horizon System Help Desk, and NBSC is the, I think it's the National Support Centre.
Network Banking Support Centre?
Yes.
And can you now recall who each of those were operated by, HSH and MBSC?
Sorry, didn't hear that.
Can you recall who operated each of those?
I can't recall.
you don't now remember whether they were post office operated or Fujitsu operated?
Well, the Horizon, I think the Horizon system helpline may have been post office, but I wouldn't, I can't recall for sure.
Okay, you say he has not made any calls to either of them prior to yesterday's audit and is now voicing his concerns over the nil transactions on card account online banking transactions. I believe that there are at least two scenarios where a nil value are recorded. These are, and then you set them out, if a customer places a card into the PIN pad, and then the second one, if a customer places a pocket card into the PIN pad. Yes?
Yes.
Over the page, please. Please, can you check any other possibilities of nil values on these types of transactions with Fujitsu? Also, as the sub-postmaster is blaming the Horizon system on his losses, please could we check that there are no problems with the Horizon kit at the branch? The branch is going to remain closed. So you're saying, I think that there are two scenarios where a nil value will be recorded on Horizon, but please can you, Mr. Ward, go to Fujitsu to see whether there are any others?
They were the only two scenarios at that time I could think of, but I couldn't 100% say there was no others. Also, a note there to confirm the branch will remain closed. I recall when I got there, the branch had actually reopened, and then I asked for it to be closed because I wasn't happy if Horizon had been given as a reason for the losses. I didn't think it was appropriate that we continue undertaking transactions on a system that may have issues.
Okay, can we scroll up then, please, to the top of page 22? Thank you. Mr. Ward, on the same day, a couple of hours later, emails Fujitsu, copying you in. Can you see that?
Yes.
Saying the email below from one of our investigators says it all. Is there a check that can be made to ensure that there were no serious errors on the system at this post office? We already have details of calls made to the help desk, see spreadsheet below, which do not highlight anything obvious. Are there general error type reports that will tell you when there's a problem with the system, which post office may not necessarily be aware of, particularly in relation to the highlighted paragraph? Have there been similar problems elsewhere? I've heard of Tivoli event logs. Could these be relevant? This case is in its early stages, but if it were to proceed to a prosecution, we'd likely need a statement which outlines how you can confirm that there were no operating errors within this office's system. I haven't submitted an ARQ yet, but can do so if you feel it's needed. Okay, so a general email from Mr. Ward to Fujitsu asking whether there are or were any serious errors on the system at this post office, but he hasn't submitted an ARQ. Yes?
Yes.
And then if we go to page 19, please. Foot of the page, please. You're not copied in on these, but I just want to see what happens within Fujitsu first. There's an internal email from Brian Pinder within Fujitsu forwarding the chain we've just looked at. Obviously, this has not come our way yet, but meanwhile, any thoughts, comments? I guess we just wait for an ARQ. But do we, security, have anything in our arsenal to go back to Graham with at all? And then scrolling up, Miss Lowther forwards it to Adet Moranfalou. Could you advise us on these, please? Then Miss Moranfalou forwards it to Richard Craig. Hi, Rick, can you have a look at this? They really need to know if there's anything else that could have caused the nil transactions. And then top of the page, he replies, thank you. The original email makes reference to an audit. To answer your question definitively, I'd need to know what data they're auditing that defines a nil transaction. Is it zero transaction values in the R or A messages, or are they auditing data in some host database or log? This matters because, for example, the counter doesn't send up an amount value in the R message for withdraw to limit, but that may be represented as a zero value in a log or database field. The same might be true for change PIN and balance inquiry. All banking transactions are approved online with the acquirer. The acquirer may decline for other reasons other than an incorrect PIN. These other reasons might cause a nil transaction. Nil transactions could also be caused by errors in PIN pad, counter, agents, or host code, depending on what constitutes a nil transaction. This can't be determined without access to the appropriate system logs. I understand that it is not felt to be appropriate at this stage for those logs to be examined by development staff. I'd recommend, however, that counter logs are harvested now before potential evidence is lost. I wonder whether we could stop there before we look at the rest of the chain later in October 2005. And if it's convenient to you, sir, take a break until 25 to 12.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear me? And Miss Matthews, can you see and hear me?
I can, yes.
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. Can we have back up FUJ 00155181, please? And page 18, please. And look at the foot of the page, please. We looked at the very bottom email. If we just look at this one, Mr. Pinder replies to Miss Moranfalou, Odette, thanks for your input here. I note Richard's reply, but without wanting to cause any further unnecessary work on our part, we've exhausted all reasonable avenues of inquiry on this. Graham's initial email, last para, states, this case is in its early stages. If it were to proceed to a prosecution, we'd likely need a statement which outlines how you can confirm that there were no operating errors with this office's system. Haven't submitted an ARQ yet, but can do so if you feel it's needed. Do we need to follow this up elsewhere, or can we leave it at that? Is there anything to go back to Graham with? And then up the page, please. We've nothing to go back to Graham with unless a call is raised to investigate, which Rick suggests happens sooner rather than later. And then thanks, let's leave it at that. And then please, if we go to page 15. And if we just look at the foot of the page, please, we can see Penny Thomas from Fujitsu sending Mr. Ward an email. As you know, nothing's ever straightforward. Here's some feedback. And then she cuts in the internal Fujitsu email that we'd seen earlier and passes it on to the post office, concluding with, in other words, we need to check the system logs. How would you like to proceed? And then if we go to the top of the page, please. We can see that you're now copied into this email. It seems that the email I've just looked at was forwarded to you, or reply by Mr. Ward to Miss Thomas, adding you in. Penny, thanks, but you've confused me. What's an RNA message? What's a host database? What's a host database? I believe nil transactions were identified on a transaction log. I think it's best that the system logs are examined in the first instance. Do you need an ARQ for this? Going back to the 1st of April 2005, is it possible for you to run a report to show nil values for the transaction examples described below, so we can see how often it has happened? So this kind of email exchange that we've seen so far, Ms. Matthews, is this essentially how investigations into Horizon were conducted with email exchanges such as this?
I wasn't aware of the majority of them emails. I wasn't privy to them. From my recollection, I informed the casework manager what I needed, and he was the liaison point into Fujitsu.
I mean, it looks like, would you agree that there was no established system?
From my end, the established system was tell casework what was required or ask them, and they had whatever procedures were in place. But I think probably back in 2005, there probably wasn't any set procedures or parameters for that.
I mean, to the outsider, it looks like everyone is flapping around a little, to be honest.
Yeah.
And the only theme that emerges is, why don't we wait and see whether a prosecution's commenced, and then maybe make an ARQ request at that point? I mean, is that an unfair characterisation?
I can't really agree or disagree with that, because that was not at a level that I was operating at. I certainly wasn't privy to them conversations.
Okay, well, Mr. Ward seeks to move it on. If we go to page 14, please. And you can see he sends you an email on the 25th of October, so a day later, copying Mr. Dawkins in and Penny Thomas in relation to the branch there. I'm not going to try and pronounce it given my tribunal, but I'm going to call it the branch on Anglesey. And he says, I've spoken with the Fujitsu security team and have agreed the following course of action. Fujitsu will investigate a thorough analysis of the system at the office going back 1 month from the date of the audit. If we need to go back further, we will do. I don't see the need to remove hardware at this point to conduct any specialist examination of the processes, particularly given the postmaster did not report any faults with the system to the HSH. I'd suggest a call is logged with the HSH, outlining the alleged fault and asking them to send an engineer to the site to conduct a test of the equipment prior to the office being reopened. I'm sure they can perform a few test transactions. Then if we go to page 12, please. This is an internal Fujitsu email, forwarding that email that we've just looked at, saying, here's a copy of Graham's request concerning the branch on Anglesey outlet. The thorough analysis I have agreed with Graham is the analysis of all nil transactions on card account / online banking transactions. And the last paragraph, as you can see, I've also suggested that Post Office log a help desk call and request that the system is checked for error. And then on to page 1, please. We can see the ARQ request that Mr. Ward settled. You'll see that it's dated the 24th of October 2005. And then if we scroll down, please, information requested. So the date range is a month before the audit, 14th of September 2005 to the 13th of October 2005. And the request is, please conduct an analysis of all help desk calls for the above period. Also, please conduct a thorough examination of the system in general, with a view to refuting the postmaster's allegation that there's a fault with the nil transactions on card account / online banking transactions. Please bear in mind we're investigating a substantial shortage in the accounts. Should this proceed to prosecution, we may be asking for a supporting witness statement. Do you get to see these ARQ requests before they are issued? Was that a no, sorry?
Yeah, no, I don't recall seeing any of these documents before.
When you say any of these documents, plainly you saw the emails that I've drawn your attention to at the time.
Sorry, to clarify, I don't recall seeing any of the ARQ documents before. these weren't completed by me, and I've not had sight of them.
Were you, did you have the facility to raise ARQ requests yourself, or did they have to be raised by Mr. Ward?
They were raised by Mr. Ward or someone in the casework management team.
You'll see that in his second paragraph, he says, please conduct a thorough examination in general with a view to refuting the postmaster's allegation that there's a fault.
Yes.
I think you'd probably agree that that's not really the open-minded way that disclosure requests ought to be settled, is it?
I agree, and that's not what my intention was for getting the information, because I've got prior knowledge of Horizon in my previous role. If there was something wrong, it needed to be resolved. So it wasn't a case from my mindset that I was looking to refute Mr. Thomas's allegations. I wanted to know what caused the shortage.
Because you told us in your witness statement that you would seek evidence with an open mind that might support the Post Office's case, but equally might assist the suspect, Mr. Thomas.
Yes, and that was one of the reasons why I didn't think it was appropriate to reopen the post office with the same equipment, because if it was the equipment, then all you're doing is passing a potential problem onto somebody else that might experience the same situation and the same losses and outcomes, and I didn't think that was appropriate.
In any event, this request is raised on the 24th of October 2005, and we've seen the emails that reflect to some extent the request that was made. Can we turn to your investigation report, please, at poll 304 4861? Thank you. So the ARQ request that we were just looking at was the 24th of October. And I think we can see, if we go to page 7, this is signed off by you on the 25th of October, the next day, yes?
Yes. Can I just add, I've not had sight previously of this particular document. I don't know if this was one that was forwarded to me this week that I've not had a chance to review, but the only one I've seen is the one that was for the discipline manager.
Yeah, that's what this document is. This was sent to you with your original Rule 9 request a couple of months ago.
Right. Okay.
If we go back to page 1, please.
Yeah, personnel.
Yeah, so you can see it's personnel. It's the discipline one I'm asking about at the moment.
Right, okay.
You'll see that it relates to Noel Thomas. It sets out his service. And then bottom of the page. These papers refer to an audit shortage at the post office on Thursday, the 13th of October 2005. And if we go forwards, please, to page 6. And 4 paragraphs in, you say Mr. Thomas is convinced that the Horizon system is affecting his balance results as the online banking summary contains several zero totals. And then you say there are a number of legitimate reasons why a zero entry would be present on the summary. 1, a customer places their card into the PIN pad terminal and enters an incorrect PIN number. 2, a customer requests a withdrawal but no funds are present in their account. 3, a customer has previously entered an incorrect PIN on 3 separate occasions and the card provider blocks the transaction. 4, the card has been reported stolen and the card has been cancelled. 5, the transaction does not receive online authorization from the card provider, even with a correct PIN entered. If Mr. Thomas has paid out funds in respect of the above transactions and a loss occurred, then this is down to incompetence and not the failings of the Horizon system. Now, this was written by you prior to the receipt of any of the ARQ data, wasn't it? Indeed, it was written only a day after the request was made.
Yes.
How did you determine that there were 5 reasons for nil transactions?
I can't remember exactly how I came to that assumption. I think it was just from my knowledge of the system.
What inquiries, training or knowledge did you rely on to say that there were 5 reasons, legitimate reasons for 0 entries?
I can't remember what prompted me to write that in terms of getting the information. I may have made some phone calls. I may have taken some advice. I can't recall.
Were you saying these were the only 5 reasons?
No.
Well, if there were more than 5 reasons potentially, why did you only list these 5?
Because this document wasn't to facilitate any criminal proceedings or make any legal decisions. This was just where the case was at the moment to give to Mr. Hughes. Sorry, Emlyn Hughes, in respect of where I was with the case from a discipline or make decisions on Mr. Thomas's role as a sub-postmaster.
Well, I'd ask you to remember that answer for a little later today, because what we'll see is that what you set out here does become part of the prosecution case, that these are the 5 reasons for legitimate nil transactions. But why didn't you wait for the results for the ARQ data to come back?
Because it was the post office procedures to send an interim report to the conduct manager, normally within the week of the audit or loss being occurred.
But why are you listing legitimate reasons for 0 entries being present in the audit without receipt of the ARQ data?
I'm hypothesising, I think, as what they could be. I can't answer that because I can't remember.
It's written quite definitively, isn't it? Not amongst the reasons why a 0 entry might be present are the following, or here is a non-exhaustive list. You're setting out the reasons, and there are 5 of them for a legitimate 0 entry being present, aren't you?
I can't tell you what I was writing at the time. I just know, probably from my experience on the counter and through the system, these were reasons I may have seen before, may have experienced before, or maybe I made a phone call. And any answer I give to that, I'm guessing, because I can't remember what forced my decision making to write that. I can't remember.
Can we move forwards, please, to a couple of months later to look at the report, the offender report prepared for criminal investigation and prosecution purposes, poll 304 4867. And if we look at page 3, please. We should, if we scroll down, see a date. It's partially obscured, but I've checked, and that's the 12th of December 2005. Can you see that?
Yes.
So this is your investigation report, and it's a 3-page report for the purposes of criminal investigation and prosecution of the 12th of December 2005. Can we go back to page 1, please? You say the purpose of the report is to provide additional information on the nil transactions for which Mr. Thomas has stated is the reason for the audit shortage. Mr. Thomas claimed that this loss had started some 12 months prior to the audit. As requested by the criminal law team, I obtained and analysed 3 periods of Horizon data covering a 12-month period. The periods are, and then you set them out. Can you see that?
Yes. I've not seen this document prior to now.
Do you need time to read it? It's 3 pages. Miss Matthews?
I'm happy for you to carry on. I'm just, you know, I haven't had prior sight of it.
Can you see that the document continues? Fujitsu had no concerns with the integrity of the data received from Gawain Post Office. Similarly, the Horizon System Help Desk, who monitor the working of the system, have not been alerted to any hardware problems, though or through their off-site monitoring or by any complaints raised by the staff at the branch. I'll summarise each week in detail. Then you set out a summary of 18th of November to the 24th of November, and over the page, 19th of May to the 25th of May, and then the foot of the page, 14th of September to the 12th of October 2005, and then on to page 3, please. In conclusion, no problems highlighted with the integrity of the data or the system. All nil online banking transactions examined have valid reasons for the transactions having no value attached to them. Majority of declined withdrawals with nil value are immediately followed by an authorised withdrawal for various amounts and undertaken by the same clerk on the same terminal. The nil transactions are undertaken by both Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Thomas on terminals 1 and 2. What qualifications did you have to analyse Horizon data, Horizon ARQ data?
I had no qualifications as such to do it.
What training did you have to analyse Horizon ARQ data?
I can't remember.
Did you have any training?
I can't remember any specific training, no.
You reach a conclusion that every transaction has a valid reason. Every nil transaction has a valid reason for having no value attached to it. How did you go about determining that there were no problems with the integrity of the data or the system, and that all of the nil transactions had valid reasons for having no value?
Can't remember. I remember getting the disc and opening it up and again looking for certain transactions and what happened next after the transaction. So you could, if I remember correctly, it may have been coded. So you're looking for what happened before and after. I mean, I can't really say with any surety what happened, what I did.
Was this usual for investigators to carry out their own self-analysis of Horizon raw data?
This was the first one that I remember undertaking, and I think...
Did you speak to any other investigators to say, look, this is my first one, I've got reams and reams of ARQ data, what do I do with it? Do I analyse it and offer my own opinion on what it shows and doesn't show?
With this case, this was one of my first cases, so I was mentored quite closely with undertaking this one, so I can only presume that I wasn't the only person involved in it.
Can we move on, please, and look at what happened next in relation to Gareth Jenkins? Can we just look at what you say in your witness statement first, please, about Mr. Jenkins? Firstly, page 31. Page 31. Paragraph 90. You say, from my recollection, I did not have any direct communication with Penny Thomas or Gareth Edwards. I think you mean Gareth Jenkins there, don't you?
Sorry, yes.
Rather than the Rugby International. Apart from to manage them as witnesses in the case, for example, dates to avoid required in court, etc. Having looked at emails now, do you now know that that's incorrect, that you did have direct communications with both Penny Thomas and Gareth Jenkins?
Yes.
If
However, I haven't, as explained earlier, I haven't had time to go through word by word every document you sent me because of the time restraint. But I can see that I did have some liaison with them, but I don't recall it.
And then page 33, please. Paragraph 97. You say, I've been asked to consider some documents. I recall meeting somebody at the post office to remove the equipment and presume from the documents this was Brian Pinder. I think Gareth Jenkins was a Fujitsu expert on Horizon and Penny Thomas was the contact for obtaining Horizon data. I've never met Gareth Thomas or Penny Thomas, and my interaction with them was regarding their witness availability. All of the requests were made via the casework management team, who would be the interface into all requests made to Fujitsu. And does that remain the case, that you had not, your recollection is that you'd not met Gareth Thomas? Sorry.
I don't recall.
I think you mean Gareth Jenkins there. Yes.
Been called all sorts. I don't remember him specifically.
And then lastly, page 98. Sorry, paragraph 98, at the foot of the page. With regard to the request for a statement from Gareth Jenkins, I would have asked the casework team for a statement regarding the Fujitsu involvement, and it would be the casework team who would go via their agreed channels and obtain this. With Gareth Jenkins offered by Fujitsu as their subject matter expert, I was not involved in this process, apart from asking for a statement. And does that remain your recollection?
Yes.
Can we look at some contemporaneous materials and the drafts of witness statements attached to emails, which indicate that both Graham Ward, the casework manager, and you were involved in reviewing and drafting parts of Mr. Jenkins' witness statement? Can we start, please, with Fujitsu 0015 2587? Can we go to page 4, please? In fact, maybe if we start at page 5, thank you. Can we see that on the 22nd of March, Mr. Ward, thank you, emails Brian Pinder?
Yes.
Copying in Naina Lowther and Penny Thomas. Brian, I'll get back to you once I've confirmed whether we need these statements or not. Can I also take this opportunity to clarify our requirements in respect of the Gerwin statement? In this case, the sub-postmaster is blaming Horizon for his losses, claiming that for various banking-related transactions, The counter desktop records amounts entered for payment, but then shows nil when the transaction log is printed. And it is this that we need to refute. Various emails passed between myself and your team on this matter, and the reply below. We've looked at those, the October 05 emails. He continues, nil transactions could also be caused by errors in PIN pad, counter, agents or hosts, depending on what constitutes a nil transaction. This cannot be determined without access to the appropriate logs. Penny also sent with the respective ARQ data additional spreadsheets which showed all nil transactions for the periods. We therefore require the usual statement producing the transaction and event logs. Penny sent me a draft. I've suggested 1 or 2 minor amendments. We also need the above spreadsheets produced by whoever put them together, explaining the headings and under what circumstances nil transactions can occur. Finally, to cover all the angles, I would also like to produce the call logs for the entire period so we can see whether the postmaster ever reported this alleged fault with the system. A statement similar to the Bill Mitchell statement will be ideal. So this is the post office through Mr. Ward asking Fujitsu through Mr. Pinder for a witness statement for filling these functions. Agreed?
Yes.
Was there any formal process that you were aware of at this time by which such a request could be made?
No.
Again, it was dealt with person to person by email, is that right?
I didn't know how Graham did it, if I'm being honest. It was just a statement was needed and he was the liaison point in. I didn't know whether he met them. I didn't know whether it was via email. I didn't know.
Who was responsible for managing requests for witness statements from Fujitsu?
The casework manager.
That's Mr. Ward.
Yes, or one of his team.
And who had responsibility for assisting with any drafting, reviewing and finalising a statement?
I probably would have had some involvement in that. From my recollection, it also went to the criminal law team.
Was Mr. Ward a manager of yours?
He wasn't a direct manager of mine, no. We worked in, obviously, another function of the same team.
Were there any reporting lines between you and Mr. Ward?
No.
And what was the division of labour between Mr. Ward and you in relation to obtaining witness statements from Fujitsu in Mr. Thomas's case, as far as you can remember?
As far as I remember, they did it.
Who's the they?
The casework manager team and Fujitsu. I don't recall much interaction with them at all.
Can we go back to page 4, please? And then scroll down. And if we just look at the bottom of that email from Miss Lowther to Mr. Ward, and then scroll on to the next page. Graham, please see the draft witness statement for the above nil transactions. Could you see if this meets your requirements? So this is 23rd of March, Miss Lowther forwarding an email or replying to Mr. Ward's email. And then if we go up the page, please, and scroll up. Reply from Mr. Ward. Layout is presumably unfinished, paragraph spacings, etc. As per my earlier email, and more importantly, the 3 spreadsheets sent with ARQ data need to be produced as exhibits. Also, the line which begins at the foot of the page appears unfinished. And then this, and I'm concerned at the words system failure which is also in an earlier line, there has been some sort of system failure. What does this mean exactly? And is there any indication of a system failure at this office during the period in question? And then if we go up, please, a page. Just scroll a little bit more, please. Thank you. We better stop there. Thank you. So let's look at the draft statement that was included and about which Mr. Ward was concerned by the use of the words system failure. FUJ 0012-2204. So it's in the name of Mr. Jenkins. If we scroll down, please. He introduces himself in the first paragraph. And then he says, there are three main reasons why a zero-value transaction may be generated as part of the banking system. One, the transaction has no financial effect, i.e. a balance inquiry or a PIN change. Two, the transaction has been declined by the bank. Three, there has been some sort of system failure. Such failures are normal occurrences. That third paragraph that Mr. Jenkins includes in this draft of his statement, can we call that the system failure reason? Ms. Matthews, to summarise it, rather than reading it out.
Okay, yes.
That's the thing that Mr. Ward was concerned about, agreed?
Agreed, yes.
Can we go, please, to the next email in the chain, FUJ 0012-2203. If we scroll to the foot of the page, thank you. An email from Nana Lowther to Mr. Jenkins. Hi, Gareth, I've updated your witness statement with the column headings, etc. And then scroll up. Thank you. A bit more. Mr. Jenkins to Ms. Lowther and Mr. Pinder. Nana, I've annotated it with revisions. In particular, I don't feel I can include the last two paras, which may make the statement useless. So remember that. I don't feel I can include the last two paras, which may make the statement useless. Let's look at the statement, please. FUJ 0012-2204. And then go to page 3. And scroll a little bit. Can you see that there's a passage apparently highlighted, which consists of two paragraphs, which I think are the last two paragraphs that Mr. Jenkins was referring to. He says, originally it said, there's no reason to believe that the information in this statement is inaccurate because of the improper use of the computer. To the best of my knowledge and belief, at all material times the computer was operating properly, or if not, any respect in which it was not operating properly or was out of operation was not such as to affect the information held on it. Any records to which I refer in my statement form part of the records relating to the business of Fujitsu services. They're compiled in the ordinary course of business. From information supplied by persons who have or may reasonably be supposed to have personal knowledge of the matter dealt with in the information supplied, but are unlikely to have any recollection of the information or cannot be traced. As part of my duties, I have access to these records. And then Mr. Jenkins has typed, I'm not sure the yellow bit is true. Can this be deleted? All I've done is interpret the data in spreadsheets that you've emailed me. So if we take into account the email that we just looked at and this attachment to it, would you agree that Mr. Jenkins was saying, I can't include those 2 yellow paragraphs because I'm not sure that they're true. Can they be taken out, please?
That's how it reads to me, yes.
What impact do you think that had on the balance of what Mr. Jenkins was saying? That he felt unable to say that there's no reason to believe that the information in the statement is inaccurate because of improper use of the computer?
I don't know what he's trying to say in that statement because it seems to contradict itself. So I don't know because I've not seen that statement before.
Looking at it now, do you think this is significant that the expert from Fujitsu is unwilling to sign a statement or have included in a signed statement a paragraph which says, to the best of my knowledge and belief, the computer was at all material times operating properly?
What concerns me is written that and then put the caveat at the bottom. I'm not sure the yellow bit is true.
Can it be deleted, please?
I've not seen that before, and
Is that very worrying?
It's very concerning. Yes, that takes away from the whole point of getting a statement.
Do you recall seeing this draft of the statement, the 23rd of March 2006 draft?
I don't recall having sight of that now. That doesn't look familiar to me. And if I'd have seen that, I would have raised concerns over it.
What about the bit on page 1, if we go back to that? And scrolling down. Do you remember this part of it, where Mr. Jenkins is saying one of the reasons, the 3 main reasons why a 0 value may be generated is that there has been some sort of system failure and that such failures are normal occurrences?
I don't recall reading this statement.
That would have been new information to you, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And it would be very significant information to you, wouldn't it?
It would have been as a system failure, yes.
And taken together with the fact that Mr. Jenkins wasn't prepared to sign a statement which said, to the best of my knowledge and belief, the computer was at all material times operating properly, that would be very concerning.
It would be, yes.
Can we go forward today, please, to the 24th of March 2006? FUJ 0012-2217. And can we start, please, at page 2? This is when Fujitsu send what we've just looked at back into the post office. Top email. Hi, Graham, please see attached. So this is Ms. Lowther to Mr. Ward. Hi, Graham, please see attached second draft for the above with further explanation regarding the issues you raise. Please let me know of any amendments as soon as possible, as we need to put this in the post to you by lunchtime. And then if we go to page 1, please. Foot of the page. Mr. Ward replies to Miss Lowther, and you're now copied in. Can you see that?
Yes.
Nana, this statement needs more work. I've attached a suggested draft with a number of comments. So to be clear, what's happening here is the Post Office is going back to Fujitsu with its own draft of the witness statement. As mentioned previously, I think the, quote, system failure normal occurrence line is potentially very damaging. It may be worth considering someone from our team taking a statement directly from Gareth. Where is he based? Whilst there's some urgency with this, it's more important to get it right and ensure we're not embarrassed at court, which we certainly could be if we produced a statement accepting, quote, system failures are normal occurrences. So to be clear what's happening here, the Post Office casework manager is amending a draft witness statement from the Fujitsu expert. Agreed?
Agreed.
And is expressing concern that the expert's mention of system failures being a cause and system failures being a normal occurrence is damaging to the Post Office and potentially embarrassing for it. Agreed?
Agreed.
If we go further up the page, thank you. Ms. Lowther forwards that email and the new draft to Mr. Jenkins. Please see the email below in the new draft statement. Let's look at the statement as it then stood, i.e. after the Post Office had amended it. FUJ 00122218. And if we go to page 2, please. And scroll down, please. Thank you. So the section between should the spreadsheets and declined by the bank is all Mr. Jenkins, as in the original. And then the next sentence has been added in by Mr. Ward in the brackets. I wonder whether this could be highlighted. This is a really poor choice of words, which seems to accept that failures in the system are normal and therefore may well support the postmaster's claim that the system is to blame for the losses, 4 exclamation marks. Can you see that the 2 reasons that Mr. Jenkins gave in his first draft of the witness statement are included? Transactions had no financial effect. Transaction has been declined by the bank, yes?
Yes.
And the third one, system failure, has been deleted.
Yes.
So the Post Office is deleting passages from a witness statement suggesting that there may be a system fault causing the loss that the postmaster was pointing to. Agreed?
Agreed.
And the Post Office is suggesting that it be deleted because it may well support the postmaster's claim. Agreed?
Agreed.
As an investigator, would you regard it as appropriate or inappropriate to delete passages from an expert's witness statement, set out your own view of events?
I think they're an expert for a reason, if that's their opinion. I don't know whether Mr. Ward was looking at the terminology used or the actual basis behind it. But either way, it's somebody's statement and it has to be their words and it has to be true.
Then if we go to page 3, please, and just pan out a little bit, please. You'll see that the usual operation of the computer parts have been deleted of the statement. Can you see that? Remember those 2 paragraphs that Mr. Jenkins said that he was uncomfortable including have gone from the statement?
Yes.
So Mr. Jenkins had said, I'm uncomfortable with these, can they be deleted? And it looks as if Mr. Ward has indeed deleted them. At the time, you were being put on notice by Fujitsu that system failures were one of the 3 main causes of nil transactions. Agreed?
From that statement, yes, but I don't recall that. I can't remember that. But it was always, you know, if somebody had raised it as an issue, then it's always a possibility. That's their belief as what's happened.
Would you agree with Mr. Ward that the system failure reason was simply a really poor choice of words by Mr. Jenkins? Or was it, in fact, something much more fundamental than that? It was actually a witness saying there is a reason related to the system that may explain the loss of which we're accusing this sub-postmaster.
I don't know the context in which it was written. I can't really comment on that.
But in any event, what we can see is the post office here expunging from the draft witness statement it might be the system that's at fault reason for the nil transactions, and expunging from the witness statement the paragraphs which Mr. Jenkins said he didn't want included, saying that I've no reason to believe that the system was other than working correctly. Agreed?
Yes.
Can we move forwards, please? FUJ 0012 2217. We see on the 28th of March, Mr. Jenkins replying back to Miss Lowther and Mr. Ward. You're not included on this. I've added some further annotations to your annotations. Does this move us forwards? Let's look at the draft, please. It was the one we were just looking at, FUJ 0012 2218. Page 2. Scroll down. Scroll down. So after the part in brackets, this is a really poor choice of words, written by Mr. Ward. Mr. Jenkins replies, now one of this can be highlighted, please can you suggest something better then? What we have here are genuine failures of the end-to-end system, which are not part of normal operation, but are anticipated, and the system is designed to cope with them. Such failures could be engineered as part of a malicious attack, but that doesn't apply to those failures that appear in the evidence presented. In all cases, the system is designed to identify such failures and handle them in a way that the customer, the postmaster, Post Office Limited, and the FIs are all clear as to the status of the transaction, and any necessary financial reconciliation takes place. I guess one option is to delete the paragraph, since it is purely an introduction to the following more detailed description. Thank you. Can you recall receiving this updated statement from Mr. Ward when it was sent to him? That can come down, thank you.
I don't recall seeing it, no.
Would it have been normal, given that you were the investigator in the case, to have received the email that I've just shown you and Mr. Jenkins' draft updated statement?
It doesn't appear to be, no. I would have expected to have seen it. My role in it was, obviously, I knew that Mr. Jenkins was going to be asked to give a statement. I didn't know the intricacies around or what took place.
Can we move it forwards, please? FUJ 0015 2587. Just to check where we are, if we go to page 2. The email we've just looked at, Jenkins to Ward and Lowther. I've added some further annotations. Does this move us forward? Yeah. And then if we go to page 1, please. That is sent on by Mr. Ward to Mr. Pinder, copied to Miss Lowther and Mr. Jenkins. And he, Mr. Ward, says, I do not understand why this statement, which was originally requested on the 10th of March, is taking so long to be put together. I appreciate it's slightly unusual, but I do not understand the confusion, as I thought I'd made our requirements clear. Unfortunately, Gareth's annotations do not take us forward at all. I'm not sure this is Gareth's fault. Gareth has indicated in the attachment below that the 3 spreadsheets produced by your team, which show the nil transactions, were not produced by him, and therefore, as he quite rightly points out, he's not in a position to produce them in his statement. He also points out that there are differences in the headings, which I wasn't aware of. As already stated, we urgently need a statement producing these 3 additional spreadsheets, explaining in general terms under what circumstances nil transactions occur, and in particular how the nil transactions at Gerwin occurred, as detailed on the spreadsheets. The same statement needs to include a paragraph which states that there is no evidence of a system error at Gerwin, assuming this is the case, in relation to the nil transactions at the office. We do not need to mention system failures being normal occurrences if there's no evidence of such a problem at this office. As I've indicated on an earlier email, it may now be best if the investigator dealing with this case arranges to meet Gareth to take the statement in person. But can you confirm that you fully understand our requirements to ensure Gareth is in a position to tie up all these requirements in one statement? Were you the investigator dealing with the case that Mr. Ward is referring to there?
The Gerwin one, yes.
Did Mr. Ward discuss with you what are described as the post office's requirements for the contents of the witness statement?
I have no recollection of that, no.
Can you otherwise recall the post office's requirements in relation to the statement that the post office was requesting from Fujitsu in relation to nil transactions?
That the parameters that I was expecting in the statement would be to do with the ARQs and the obtaining of them.
This is talking about the post office's requirements for the content of a witness statement, isn't it? Not about the ARQ.
Yes, but I wasn't aware of this.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 0015 5721? can we see at the top of the page an email exchange within Fujitsu? I've arranged for Diane to meet with Gareth at 11 o'clock on Thursday the 4th to record the statement. She's already had sight of the statement and comments which Gareth can provide, so it shouldn't take too long. Once she's done this, I thought it'd be nice to introduce her to the security team, show her around the audit room to see how we do things, and then perhaps a few minutes open forum to discuss all aspects of the prosecution service. She may also bring another member of the investigation team along, which will all help to oil the wheels when requests come in. Did you attend a meeting with Mr. Jenkins for the purposes of taking a witness statement from him?
I don't recall any of that, no. I just don't recall. I don't recall meeting him.
An email sent on Saturday, the 1st of April 2006, referring to Thursday, would be referring to the 6th of April, just by looking at a calendar, okay?
Yeah.
How many times in your 4 years as an investigator did you attend Fujitsu's offices?
I remember attending once, and I thought it was to do with the hardware equipment at the office.
Do you recall attending, to speak with a Fujitsu employee face-to-face to take a witness statement from them?
I can't remember.
Do you now recall attending and taking a witness statement on the 6th of April 2006 with Mr. Jenkins at Fujitsu's office?
Can't remember. I know I've been, I think it was in Reading, and I know I've been on one occasion. I seem to think it was to do with the equipment that was being checked, because I asked for it to be checked, but I can't recall.
Can we look, please, at FUJ 0012-2237? We can see a witness statement dated the 6th of April 2006 from Mr. Jenkins, if we scroll down. You can see what he says. Just read that slowly. And then go over the page, please. And then scroll down. And then scroll down. And keep going. Just stopping that. And then read carefully the last paragraph. There's no reason to believe that information in the statement is inaccurate. To the best of my knowledge and belief, at all material times, the computer was operating properly. Then over the page. That's the end of it. So having looked at the email correspondence, that can come down, thank you. Having looked at the comments in the email correspondence and the process of travelling drafts of Mr. Jenkins' witness statement, and having looked at that last signed version of the witness statement, can you see that, firstly, Mr. Jenkins originally said that an explanation for the nil transactions may be a Horizon system fault, and that that has been taken out of his signed witness statement?
Yes.
Secondly, he said that he was unprepared to sign a witness statement saying that at all material times the Horizon system was operating properly. But that has been added back into his witness statement. Can you see that? It's the last paragraph we just read.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
So the passage indicating that it might be a system fault has evaporated, hasn't it?
Yes.
And his unwillingness to sign a statement which says that the system was operating at all times properly has been overcome, hasn't it?
It appears to be yes.
How's that come about?
I don't know because I don't remember. I don't even remember taking that statement.
Would you accept on the basis of the documents that we've looked at that it appears that the Post Office sought to harden up Mr. Jenkins' witness statement?
It appears that they go in self-preservation mode by the sound of it.
So might that be an appropriate moment to break for lunch?
Yes, certainly.
So I wonder whether we can take a slightly shorter lunch, given the earlier finishing time today, and reconvene at past.
Subject to any representations from the transcriber, yes.
She's saying fine, thank you.
Yeah, fine. So 1:30 then.
Thank you very much, sir.